anyway, this is what he wants.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And welcome back. We have Ryan. I'm glad, Ryan, you're feeling better. And
Thanks,
you got
Dr.
zapped by you're zapped by the flu bug. Of course, we have antipathogenics. And by the way, there's a lot of yahoos out there, and they yahoos try to pretend that they have something that will kill pathogens. We have our Allison Med. We've got Nutridyne Silver 100 and my NutriDefense. We have things like high-dose Power C. And by the way, it's not regular vitamin C. You can take 20, 30, 50, 60 grams of ours and won't get diarrhea because it's the only vitamin C that's a salt that's at neutral pH, not just buffered, neutral, which is sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, ascorbate with biopterin black pepper extract to increase absorption by 40%. And then when you combine that with things like minoquinone 7, full vitamin K2, or what we call apoptogenic agents such as ellagic acid and malignoblock, you massively not only reduce the chances of cancer, but also autoimmune diseases. And the high-dose Power C will block the receptor binding domain along with things like NutriDefense and, of course, things like Green Tea Select, which we have with the catechins. So we have a whole range, including MyCell D3. Most people don't realize if you get an acute infection with the flu or any bug, you just need to bump up your dosage of MyCell D3 to, say, equivalent of 4 to 5 soft gels twice a day of the 5,000 IUs, and basically the virus can't replicate or spread to other cells because you've blocked the receptor binding domain. Isn't that interesting? Just bump it up to 3 or 4 days of other vitamin D, and I actually recommend also the Myco D2 as well to block the mushroom-based D2. But the D3 receptor, if you just block it, the virus can't spread, period. And high-dose vitamin C, our Power C, plus the MyCell D3, and my NutriDefense, which has the most powerful antioxidant catechin to block the receptor binding domain, the virus can't go anywhere. It's done.
Well, that's what I've been working on, using those protocols. And, my wife had a validated case of the flu, and I'm sure I did, although my test came back negative, and I've worked real hard in the last few days.
How many people in the last few months have died in California from...
ready to kind of get back at things, and a lot of people...
Well, you're lucky because...
weeks.
Well, I got a call a week ago from an EMT who was actually kind of taking what I call a baby dosage of our antipathogenics, wasn't taking them properly. And he had kind of been trundling along for a few weeks, and all of a sudden he decompensated, ended up with lobar pneumonia in hospital. Of course, he's working with people that have got the flu as an EMT. And you got to listen up, okay? When I give you a protocol with a certain dosage and you've got a serious bug, because these latest flus aren't just playing around with you. In California alone, in the last few months, it's killed 147 people. The strain called PH1N1. This same strain showed up, by the way, from a U.S. lab in eastern Ukraine. It has now killed over, I think, between 20 and 30 soldiers in eastern Ukraine and sickened several hundred. So you need to understand these are not minor bugs. If you decompensate with these bugs, because they can last a month, this particular flu that's going around, it's not just a minor thing. If it lasts longer than 4 days to a week, it may go south after even a week or more, and you feel like, hey, I'm getting better, and bam, all of a sudden you get lobar pneumonia or you're in hospital. So it's important to realize we have these protocols here. I have the 1, 2, 3, which is in the Dr. U book, and the Dr. U book is really important for everybody out there to get. It's going to explain to you functional medicine, which is much more comprehensive than a complementary alternative or herbal medicine, and much more comprehensive than chiropractic, regular medicine, surgery, because it includes all those, but it also includes things like biophysics, toxicology, stealth pathogens, pathology, all kinds of things that should be included in the global look at the epigenetics of whether you get sick or not. Remember now, genes are not deterministic, they're permissive, and if you take the right nutraceuticals, you switch on and off the right genes. And you can actually alter the way your genes are expressed, and you can read from the right books, I call of the library. In other words, if you have a real good librarian and she says, now you little kids, the library books with the purple tags on them, you're not allowed to take out of the library or open in the library. That's what we should do with our bodies. When you open those purple tags, they're the ones that cause oncogenes to activate to cause cancer or make you sick or knock out your immune system. So when you take the right nutraceuticals, you don't read from the wrong books. How's that?
I like that.
Yeah, it explains a little bit more simply.
Shrink wrap them. Don't read them.
Exactly. Don't read them. Don't read those suckers. They'll get you. So let's talk about some of the products. So what I like to see the other day with Clay, pick out the top 2 or 3 products you like of our NutriMed line, and then we'll kind of expand on them as to how you use them.
Well, right now I'm heavily invested in the immune side of things, as you were saying, Dr. Bell.
Right.
You kind of covered those, but I will tell you, some of my favorites. Let me just go with mobility issues, because this has made an impact dramatically on my life, and I know many others. But products like Tendon Mender, just find it so fascinating, because so many people struggle with the repetitive motion injuries, and they really don't have very good solutions. And that is such a very cool compound that, allows kind of a reprogramming of the tenocytes, where by ultrasound they've studied it and shown that the tenocytes will lay back down, they'll thin out, and they'll improve, your body's range of motion and quit shooting out all these inflammatory signals. And so many people that are stuck, in that situation of repetitive motion injury, with shoulder, elbow, knee, Achilles, plantar fasciitis, carpal tunnel type issues with the wrist. So those are all people that can be helped, I think, dramatically with that formula.
Yeah, it's like curcumin in our cell defense and Regenerex. It's an epigenetic modulator. In other words, it modulates your genes to actually return them to a normal state where you don't have excessive inflammation, you have healing, you have reduced swelling, you have the tenocytes returning to normal physiology, being, weakening the ligaments or increasing swelling that causes a compression of nerves and causes interfascial adhesion and so on.
Yeah.
What's the next one?
Well, I like Collagen Max. Collagen Max is it's got a twofold effect. You've got a lot of issues with how the body's producing collagen, elastin, and keratin that affects, as I was just talking about, joint issues, and mobility. But the fact is, this is a formulation that people, love because of the effects they see on the outside. These are people that are starting to get they get weak, brittle nails, their hair is thinning, falling out, breaking, skin is wrinkling a lot. And it's fascinating to watch what Collagen Max can do, not only on the outside of the body, but then that functionality, that popping, clicking, range of motion improvements that they see that's happening on the inside. Because we know if you're falling apart on the outside, things are falling apart on the inside. And Collagen Max is a rate-limiting step. It fulfills a rate-limiting step for that production, as we're saying, the collagen, elastin, and keratin. And it's sort of like once you go on that formulation, most people don't really ever want to go back, because they just know that it's a missing nutrient that they needed.
Yeah, and then, by the way, it's not collagen. We have people that try to second guess Dr. Deagle, and that's really, there's no other word for it. It's stupid, okay? This is a choline stabilized orthosilicic silicon, and it triples the rate of an enzyme called proline transhydroxylase, okay? That enzyme makes more collagen, which, by the way, there's over 30 types of collagen in your body. Type 1 collagen is the one in your bones. It increases the elastin, which is in your arteries and your skin, and all through your body. It increases hyaluronic acid polymer in your skin so you can't see wrinkles. The hyaluronic acid polymer in your joints and in your eyeballs, because most people don't realize it's a polymer of hyaluronic acid that carries the fluid in your eye. It's not carried by blood. The blood supply is only to the retina, the other areas of the eyeball, the external sclera, etc. But the actual eye is nourished by oxygen carrying capacity, nutrient carrying capacity of hyaluronic acid polymer that goes through the cycles through the anterior chamber of the eye and the posterior chamber. That's why when you get intraocular pressures going up, you want to be taking anti-inflammatories like Vision Max, Can-C eye drops, and Nutritrala and Regenerex, and of course cell detox glutathione, because it's in, and of course the things for the blood vessel walls, vein away, for the circulation in the eye, and ultrathiamine B1, because they help to stop glycation, which is a major inflammatory marker of the meshwork in the eye. So Collagen Max is really cool. It works in so many different areas of your body. Once you start taking it, you look, if you're a woman and you say your nails are cracking, or your skin's getting wrinkled, or your hair is starting to get kind of what I call lanugo hair. It's kind of breaking off. Your hairdresser say, "Oh my gosh, look at your hair," and all of a sudden you start taking it in a few weeks and say, "My gosh." They actually did studies in Europe, because this is a nutropharmaceutical. It's not just a nutritional. And they found in actual photographic studies by independent reports that reduced wrinkles in, I think, only as little as 6 weeks by 57%. I was like,
well, you got, yeah, 20 weeks, I'll correct that. 20 weeks, 30% improvement over placebo. And these are people doing nothing. So I know women listening or whatever.
Yeah, they weren't doing they weren't doing creams or Botox or
creams and different things. This is just literally doing nothing to your skin. You're not allowed to do anything except take something that is working orally. And so when you hear all these commercials about, oh, here's the latest skincare cream that you're going to pay $100 a month for, it's silly not to use some Collagen Max.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have a little story there with Ryan? There's a lot of, when I get my protocols, people say, well, how do you know so much about hundreds of different health conditions? Well, the first thing, I've been very curious since I was hatched, I would say, by my mother. I started reading at 3 and pulled my first Swiss watch apart, 17-jewel watch and reel-to-reel tape recorder, and put them back together at 4. So I've been a very unusual child, let's put it that way. A bit of a pain in the butt always, because I asked teachers to drove my teachers crazy from the time I was in grammar school. But what happened is basically, I'm a Christian, and I really believe that God gives me a lot of the knowledge that I have. When I get stuck, even with a tough case, I'll actually just, pray on it. Where do I go in the medical references? What do I do when I see these records? And I would say 3/4 of the time when I'm lost, I'll get an instant answer. Sometimes it takes a week or two to get an answer, but I'll always get one. And what people need to understand, these hundreds of protocols not only have science behind it, because you see, that's what the way God works. I can give you, for example, functional medicine tests, whether it's the lumen photon or bioplasm, to look at your bioplasmatic body. But I can give you conventional imaging studies, organic acids, metabolites, stealth pathogens, neuroimmunology tests, conventional advanced imaging tests, and almost every type you can imagine to verify what I'm telling you works and that it's improving your physiology even before you have symptoms or develop a full-blown disease, whether it's cancer or autoimmune conditions. So, in other words, what I'm saying, when you see, for example, the 1, 2, 3 conditions and whatever, a lot of the source information we have here is not only advanced conventional, but it's supernatural. In other words, when I'm lost, I pray. And people need to grasp that if they have conditions they think can't be cured, we have people, for example, that have hepatitis B and C, and they take our nutraceuticals, for example, we've had for years, they take our Allison med, and if they have herpes, it goes in remission. And as long as they stay on it, and I don't like to use the word cure. I tell people, even when Jesus resurrected the dead, the cure was temporary. Eventually they died.
Yeah. Good point.
So the word cure should not be used in the human language. When the drug companies have this, because they have by law the word cure, I don't like the word cure for anybody. What I can do is I can put your condition in remission, I can put you in a state of healing, I can put you in a state of zero or close to zero senescence, so you actually reverse the aging. Aging is bidirectional, by the way. So when we see a joint heal, a good example, I had a gentleman here last year. He was told by his doctor, you need a total knee replacement. Of course, just blank. He went to the orthopedic surgeon and said, yeah, I need total replacement. So I said, no, get a MRI arthrogram. This is conventional now, because I prayed on it, and I said, get an MRI arthrogram, you tell me what the report says. He said, well, the MRI arthrogram showed there's a real problem with your patella. I said, you need to have your orthopedic surgeon realign the patellar tracking with a customized knee brace beforehand, and you need to have them deeper the back of the joint. Then you need to take our nutraceuticals. You need to be taking Tendon Mender, Joint Performance, Mountain Red Velvet, and Collagen Max. You need to have that hyaluronic acid polymer put in there behind the patella initially, so you're not getting eburnation of just cartilage on cartilage. And that would be the Hylan, or 3 million molecular plate rooster comb polymer called Hylan, which I put in many, many times with people. It's very easy in the knee joints with those C-arm x-ray. And if you have a deeper joint like the hip, you do it with a C-arm, where you can actually fluoroscopically see where the joint needle and the needle is where in the joint. Well, he got better. And I have these cases every day. People say, well, how do you know this stuff? I said, look, you got to understand, I have a gift of healing, and that gift I give glory to God on that healing. A lot of it, God will give me conventional ways of proving what I'm telling is true. So when I told this gentleman, he went out to his doctor and said, well, I want an MRI arthrogram, and the orthopedic surgeon, they're ready to cut out his knee and replace it. The same way I tell people, I have connections to clinics like Centeno's Clinic, who I used to work on an IRB panel on pain research back in Colorado in the 90s. And he has a clinic in Grand Cayman Islands because the FDA forced him to take his clinic out of Broomfield and move it to Grand Cayman, because if you take stem cells out of someone's bone marrow, multiply them 24 hours, they said it's a drug. That's what they said, these morons. So he had to move his clinic, which increased your cost. You got to go down for a 2-week vacation. He takes the bone marrow out, and instead of spinal surgery or joint surgery like joint replacement, he literally alters the stem cells, injects them back after he's grown them in the lab while you're on vacation, into the joint or spine on the C-arm, and you regenerate your spine. You don't need to have a disc surgery or a knee replacement or a joint replacement in your shoulder. So you want the right nutraceuticals, though. If you don't have the building blocks, when you do these things, you're not going to optimize care. For example, if I was to tell Centeno, I said, when I send somebody to Centeno, they have to have all of the right nutraceuticals in their body, in their bloodstream, or they're not going to get optimal healing. Just not going to happen. If you don't have adequate, for example, vitamin D levels, your stem cells don't work. Do you know that? Do you know that you can't even fight cancer unless your vitamin D-associated granulocyte macrophage activation factor is actually optimal? If your blood levels are too low, and you can do a blood test at LabCorp or Quest, it will work. Isn't that amazing? So these basic nutrients like zinc, copper, nutrients, and by the way, other people say, well, we're just going to give you ionic minerals. They're nuts, because they also converge to the same transport mechanism, so you end up causing deficiency states. You'll never optimize the maximum level inside the cell or the nucleoplasm, which is inside the cell. There's a little I even want to call subcell, or the nucleolus, where the DNA is. And if you don't get that optimized levels of minerals in the nucleolus, you can't even turn on your DNA to make enzymes or structural proteins. Every enzyme in your body, every protein needs like a white or dark key on the keyboard hit, like a note, in order for the DNA to uncover or unfold, so it creates that particular messenger RNA to make the protein. Isn't that cool? I mean, the way God made us is so miraculous, you have to say, wow, this is incredible, isn't it?
It really is.
And what people should really grasp is that we are a walking, living, breathing miracle, and every other living thing on earth, plants, animals, trees, it's amazing. And again, we have to understand those same principles probably apply to the whole universe. So what we need to understand is we have a very great God, okay? But he's going to give us inspiration. Why are we spraying toxic things on to get rid of mosquitoes? Why do we let the Gates Foundation really weaponize mosquitoes that would cause it to become a mutant, we call weaponizer of whatever pathogen it carries, because they're an unstable genetic mutant carrying levels of free radicals in their bodies? Again, if you expose a ferret to a cyclotron, you're going to mutate whatever pathogen you have in it, so you'll become a bioweapon. That's what the Gates Foundation did. And they also then come up with a vaccine. So I tell people it's not optional to take nutraceuticals anymore. You're living in a time of the world where if you don't take nutraceuticals and drink clean filtered water and try to detox your body, you're going to get sick early and you're going to die hard. Like that movie series with Bruce Willis, Die Hard? Well, this is going to be a real die hard. And if you fall into the jaws of the conventional medical system, God help you. Or actually, it won't help you, because you're now in the hands of the devil. If you look at Obama, 86% can't even afford the copays for even valid surgery like cataract surgery, aortic, Dacron grafting, whatever you need. If your aorta is shot. Well, if you don't get it done, you're going to die. Okay, so there are appropriate times when if you don't have the surgery, you're going to the other place. You're not going to be around here much longer. So, what nutraceutical would you like to pick next, Ryan? Because you can tell I want to be people expand when they see these wellness protocols. There is no substitute for the fact that there's supernatural intervention giving them a healing, is what I want to call it, a rebalancing, a regeneration. There's not the word cure there, because even if I was able to resurrect the dead, it's all temporary. You're alive for now, but you're going somewhere someday. Back in a minute.
Hey, I'll be right back.
Well, welcome back. So let's go with some other nutraceuticals. What we're dealing with, by the way, here in America, I really believe that the Nutrimedical ministry, because that's what it is, not only deals with what we call God does not assault your intellect when he provides you supernatural interventions. And when we have the upcoming plagues, for example, Zika virus, the H1N1 flu, which, by the way, is already in California, killed 147 people. These weaponizing superflus and other strains are getting more and more frequent and more violent. The H3N6 in China is killing people like crazy. The SARS beta coronavirus is not going away. The Ebola is not disappearing. They keep on saying, we're Ebola free for 60 days. Come on, now it's embedded in your population. It's killed 90 to 95% of the great apes in Africa. This is not going away. And these filoviruses, like the Zika virus, when they get embedded in animal populations in your local area, or they get embedded into the pets, it's not going to disappear in the Caribbean or Haiti or the Dominican Republic. They're not going away. And what people need to understand, if they don't have nutraceuticals in this toxic world where the government won't fix Fukushima Daiichi, and we're all being irradiated, if you go to Veterans Today, you'll see radiation levels that are off into orbit. And I have my radiation detectors there all the time, and I can tell you, we're lucky. We're far enough south, we don't see very much, but there are wafting periods of radiation where it goes from X to 2 or 3 times X, and then it goes back up and down. We know that's ambient levels of airborne pollutants that are radiotoxins from Fukushima, because San Onofre is inactive. There's nobody else out here. the toxic water, the toxic pollution, Wi-Fi networks, cell phones, all these things, and training the DNA. The human race is terminal. And they say if it doesn't go out with a bang, it'll go out with a whimper. But either way, it's going. Without the intervention of the Creator God. And when we do this ministry here at Nutrimedical, we're trying to hold back the fire of judgment on a lost and ignorant people with an ignorant and self-centered and self-serving healthcare system that's too damned expensive and is not trying to fix the underlying problems. I know as a doctor that went into medicine at age 21, I was very disappointed by the fact that most doctors don't want you to ask tough questions or to question and even develop a scientific rationale as to why you did different things. I remember the first time I went to my head oncologist at the Vancouver General, which is the second largest complex in the world, outside the Karolinska in Stockholm, Sweden. And I said, I killed a lot of people today because I'd given a lot of chemo. And I said, I get called back to the floor, and then they go into coarse VFib, vine VFib, and they arrest, and I can't get them back even if I fry their chest with the paddles, a lot of gel. And I said, we should do something, figure out what's the underlying problem, get their electrolytes fixed up, put them on hyperalimentation. I was just throwing out some ideas. I said, he looked at me like I was from Mars. Now, I don't have any patience anymore at 64 this next week. My patience with stupid is gone decades ago. And people say, oh, Dr. Deagle, you should be nice. Why? When it's killing people. And I think that alternative medicine, functional medicine, is not an alternative. If you are an oncologist or a plastic surgeon or a pediatrician or whatever, and you're not using integrative functional medicine as part of your practice, you're a danger to your patients. Yes, they're an appropriate place for 20% of drugs 20% of the time and 25% of surgery. 25% of the time could be life-saving. But most of the treatments that are currently given by the medical system, not just here in America, but around the world, there's no shortage of stupid elsewhere, is meddlesome, dangerous, and vile. And that's a professional opinion, not just my offhand emotional opinion, is vile. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah. And people, I beg people. I said, if you disagree, don't send me stupid emails. Call in live. Make your statement. And don't, by the way, use ad hominem attacks. That's not going to work with me. I have a titanium alloyed thick skin. I don't care what you think of me. I love you and care for you and will die for you, but I won't take a centillion of your crap. I want you to understand, I do know, and by and large, unless you can prove it to me, even if you have grade 3 and you've got a good point, you can teach me. I'm teachable. But don't think you're going to get me into an intellectual headlock. I'm going to make you tap out in 30 seconds if you think you know more than me, and you think that you're going to be able to say something that will be harmful to my audience or cause destruction. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people flogging nutraceuticals that are unqualified idiots, or even doctors that pretend to be in functional medicine that really I want to call kindergarten level. And most conventional doctors are dangerous. They're given so many drugs that the average person in their late 60s on 9 to 12 drugs. Now, do you think that those people are rational and normal human beings? They're a shell of a human. They're in what I call pre-embalmed. How's that? Pre-embalmed. People say, oh, no, Dr. Deagle, you're exaggerating. I wish I was. I wish I didn't know all this crap, but I do. And you know what? I got enough backbone that I'm going to tell you the truth. And I can tell you, when you get Dr. Yu book and the other books I'm bringing out, one on bioplasm and other, I'm bringing out a position paper on everything from immigration to healthcare to borders to everything. You need to understand it's not a matter of lack of solutions. If we're real Christians, God will always give us the real solutions. The reason why things are wrong is not because the solutions aren't there, whether it's functional medicine, because if I can even get an hour or two with any doctor of any specialty, I can make him a better doctor, just on the phone or email or Skype. Just say, add this to your plastic surgery practice. You want to have people recover faster. You want people not have problems with pain in the post-op room. Here's what you do. But you know what? Doctors, I remember one doctor 12 years ago said, Dr. Deagle, please don't tell me anymore. I can't deal with the guilt of knowing what to do because I'll get in trouble with my colleagues in the state licensing authority and the hospital privileges committee if I do what you say, even if it's logical and it works. He actually said that to me in a conference in Phoenix, Arizona, some years ago. So you got to grasp here, we're providing you a service here that is going to transform your life. You're going to become doctor. You're going to know when you're going to say to a dentist, no, you're not taking my mercury out unless you're a biological dentist and are protecting yourself and your staff and me from the vaporized mercury, taking the damn things out of my mouth. You're not going to do this without detoxing me so I don't get a massive surge and develop any things like a stroke or cardiac arrhythmias or congestive heart failure or cancer because you didn't properly detoxify me when you're taking the damn things out of my head. Yeah. And people don't know that. They think, Dr. Deagle, why are you giving Keeler Max? I mean, I remember talking recently to a dentist, and I asked him, I said, what test did you do? He's a biological dentist. I said, what test did you do to make sure you don't have mercury in yourself? Because you get all these special things of high-flow suction and everything. And remember, he's a biological dentist, and he said, well, I just did a blood test. I said, did you do a challenge beforehand, like, our Keeler Max or, EDTA or whatever? Oh, no. I said, well, why did you think that a non-challenged level will tell you what your levels of mercury are? He looked at me like, uh-oh, I got a live one here. Yes, you do. SOB, you do. And when I told him what you need to do, he started freaking out and realized you could see his hair was standing on ends. He realized, oh, crap. This is an area that's a big black area that I don't know that's going to put me and my patients and staff in danger. Yeah. And that's why so many dentists die of suicide or get depressed or develop serious organic or neurological conditions because they're not being careful, even the ones that are biological. So, like when I tell people, do you have heavy metals? You can do a QRMA test or you can do a packed red cell test through Genova Metametrics Lab. How many people do you think in America have heavy metals in their body?
100%.
Yeah, exactly. The most common is lead, from leaded gasoline over the last 5-6 decades, even though they stopped in the 1970s.
And then aluminum, right, Dr. Bill? Aluminum's really
aluminum's everywhere. Oh, and not only, here's another thing, that since the 1980s and since the 90s especially, they've been putting nanoparticles to weaponize the upper atmosphere to turn into a plasma at 73 to 80,000 feet to create a Dyson sphere of nanoparticles that allowed to use high-energy plasma interferometry and satellite-based techniques for actually manipulating the weather, geotectonics, earthquakes, and volcanoes, and moving weather systems, literally turning the Earth into a weaponized planet, and using high-energy infrared lasers, and those nanoparticles are dropping. Strontium, barium, thorium, aluminum. And barium in a nanoparticle is 10,000 times more toxic to nervous tissue than even lead. But yet people don't think the need to detox from Keeler Max? Come on. I can prove it to you. Do a red cell pack test or QRMA. I can prove it to you with conventional. Tim Alexander, and his blog Europe Business with 1s.blogspot.com. And
I'm charging you extra money. You got me on here early. That'd be extra $100,000.
Well, that's actually in spiritual dollars, and don't worry, your bank account. You'll be like you're like me. I'm in the spiritual bank account. We're like Scrooge McDuck. We can take a high diving board into the money pit of spiritual dollars because these are actually little cards that say you get into heaven free if you take 1,000 with you.
Yeah, well, that's great. I like that. Awesome ever. It would be nice to have more hard currency, but anyway.
Here's the situation. I want to give. We talk about the Zika virus, and of course, they declared it this week as a state of national emergency. I found out something else more, that adds to the horror of this, that the Gates Foundation in China has come out with the Zika virus vaccine. They're not guaranteeing, though, they'll have it ready in time for the Rio Olympics, but they're in the process. They also have a division.
The Gates Foundation, have they?
Right. There's also another company or foundation, I don't know if they're tied to Gates in India, that says they have a Zika virus vaccine already. Now, I don't know how they could have it already.
They're working fast, aren't they?
Well, I think that there was called parallel tracking it. In other words, the first thing is whether it was weaponized in a laboratory and later released to the community, or, and this is something that's in many ways much nastier, and I know I saw a little bit of the program that Alex put on talking about with one of his guys. These people really don't understand the level of infectious parasitology and so on that I'm going to explain right now. And this is, I'm an expert on this, they're not, okay? The first thing is when you release an unstable genetic mutant, it has high levels of free radicals because of gene instability, and it is a weaponizer. In other words, if you take a pathogen and you take an animal like a ferret and you expose it to a cyclotron, or you have an unstable genetic mutant, there's high levels of free radicals, so the pathogen that's carried in it, vectored by this organism, like a ferret or a mosquito, then becomes weaponized. In other words, if you take they did this actually last year, 2 years ago, with one of the people trying to experiment with, could they make a new super weaponized version of the H1N1 flu? So what they did is they passed it through ferrets 10 times, and each time what they do is they blow the ferret with radiation, and it turns out that as you did this, it increased the weaponization of the pathogen, so finally by the 10th time, it was real deadly. Now, the danger is that this mosquito is moving up not only through Central and South America, because most of the new cases are caused by mosquito bites from these new weaponized, new mutant surviving strains, because the reason why they survive is because there's an ambient concentration of antibiotics in the environment to prevent the larvae from dying when they hybridize the males, which are released by Bill Gates Foundation in Brazil in 2012. With females, the larvae is supposed to die unless there's tetracycline, but it turns out Brazil is the largest user of tetracycline on the planet for their animals. So 3/4 of the tetracycline is ambiently in the water and the puddles and the rain and everywhere all over the country, so there's going to be a large number. So guess what they decided again this week? The Brazilian government decided to release more of the Gates Foundation weaponized male mosquitoes, because they say it reduced the mosquito population, but unfortunately they say it reduced it 90%. But guess what? That 10% survived were mutants are pushing the evolution to make sure that they will survive, and these mutant mosquitoes are weaponizing whatever pathogens they carry. So they could weaponize other pathogens we don't even know about yet. Now, at the
they're
same time,
essentially creating a super micro advanced biowar lab in the gut of each of these mosquitoes.
Billions of them, man. It's like going to Las Vegas. You play Keno, which I don't play. I don't like gambling.
I've never been to Vegas. Don't really want to go.
Right, yeah, I don't like Vegas. I like Vegas for the big shows. I do not like gambling. Okay, if I go on a cruise ship, to me, gambling is sitting there playing a couple rounds of blackjack and not worried about losing $20 or something. But I don't like gambling. I think gambling is disturbing. Okay, it's evil. Okay, the devils are they're gambling. Here's the screw tape letters going to take off C.S. Lewis on this latest ground. One night, in a dream vision, Bill Gates is there by his bed, and he's saying his prayers to Satan, which he does, because his father, of course, this guy is a globalist, and he wants to reduce world population. He's a maniac, okay? Which is why his predatory practices set up Microsoft Corporation and were able to beat off the competition. If you see the movie about him and Apple Corporation, you just see what kind of a monster Bill Gates is. He doesn't just have Asperger's syndrome.
He was funded largely because of his father and mother, and because of their involvement with the eugenics movement, and that's why IBM really cut him a deal. His path was greased at the highest levels, and he's repaying that favor now by his continuing support with his multi-billion-dollar foundation, and it's all about eugenics and birth control and abortion.
Right, and said he's going to reduce the world population by providing high-quality health care. That's his actual statement. I'm actually quoting syllable for letter what the maniac said, okay? So people need to grasp this. And one of the things that I repeatedly say in the show, and a lot of people get offended by it, but tough on them, okay? Stupid is not okay if it puts us all in danger. It's like giving a fire axe to a maniac on a lifeboat. You don't do it, okay? So stupid is not okay.
You only do it one time.
Right, and the problem is when you have somebody, for example, and this is the latest thing that really irritates me, is this idiot maniac I call political jihadist Obama, who pretends to be a Christian when tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Christians have died or been raped to death or beheaded in the Middle East, and now he's trying to whine about persecution of Muslims. There hasn't been any persecution of Muslims in this country. In fact, the few moderate Muslims that don't believe in the Hadith and Jihad, all this other crap, they've been persecuted by their own mosques, and we're not shutting down these mosques. 170 of them came out now. Stephen saw them on Fox News, where in 1 week in Houston, 170 imams were fired because they recommended, they agreed with Trump about stopping possible extreme Muslims coming into the country that could cause terrorism. Because they know if things get out of hand, guess where all the Muslims are going to be put? They're all, indiscriminately, including the moderate ones that are reasonable, going to be put in civil detention camps. Now, my feeling is Islam is like oil and water. It doesn't mix with Western society, period. And the reason is even the moderate ones tolerate the extreme ones, because they don't have the guts to stand up to them because they're afraid they'll have a fatwa on them, they'll be executed. And they all believe in the thing called dhimmitud, which is to persecute the kafirs, or the unbelievers. They all believe in the idea of Sharia law. 51% of American Muslims, even born here, believe in Sharia. That's not consistent with being American. It says that your Sharia supersedes the Constitution and the rights of the rule of law and the courts and the state. Period. Sharia law is a Sharia court, Sharia way of your dietary habits, how you run your family. There's no such thing as free speech in Sharia. If you criticize Muhammad, you get executed before Friday morning prayers. That's a fact, okay? Now, so for people out there that think that they have a better opinion...
I criticize openly, totally Muhammad. He was a camel salesman, and he was a false prophet, and they can kiss my butt.
Right. Now, here's the point. And right now what's going on in places like Sweden, I saw the reports last night in the news, that they actually have a situation where there are people that are who call football fans, or I guess... soccer fans, and they're going around in black ski masks and so on, and literally giving notices to these Muslims. It's so bad in Sweden, where they got 9 million people, and they've got, cradle to grave kind of social welfare. They have all these Muslims coming in there, a lot of them extremely violent, raping girls, killing them and everything. There was one, apparently social worker, a young social worker, was recently killed by one of these young Muslim maniacs. And
she
the people
was a
there
pretty Swedish blonde, blue-eyed.
Right, and basically...
I think it was a 15-year-old male killed her.
Right, now here's the point. This doesn't work. Now, when I see Obama going to... And by the way, he didn't go to a moderate mosque, because there are moderate mosques and Islamic organizations are trying to secularize Islam, so they don't believe in Sharia law, they don't believe in jihads, and they want to get along. And guess what? There's a lot of them here in America. But rather than support, he goes to a mosque which has a long history of radicalized imams. A lot of them had to be jailed, supporting extreme Islam in other countries. So this maniac Obama goes to a mosque. He doesn't talk about the fact that the most persecuted people in America are Jews, and the next persecuted groups are basically Christians, especially in the Middle East, that are being beheaded and raped to death, and including the Yazidis are being killed, sold off as